All right, Jim, we are recording. Good to see you.
Good morning. It's good to see you all.
And yeah, well, as we were sitting down, Lauren said to me, so who is this guy? What does he do? And what are we going to talk about? And what questions can I ask him? I'm like, you know what, Lauren? I think we met for about 30 seconds in a corridor in Miami, and I've got a lot of my own questions. So there's not much we can go on here. But
And it's great. That means there's plenty of questions to be asked. No,
ex-
every
exactly.
rock is unturned at this point.
All right. So what did we decide to go with? What would you like to know?
What is a financial planner?
Ooh, that's a good question. We're as an industry or profession, we're confused. We sort of have an identity crisis. So asking me versus asking another financial planner versus another one, you'll get all different answers. Um, in my opinion, a financial planner is someone who serves as a guide to help, in its most basic sense, help you articulate what's important to you in life or in a particular goal, and then align your resources. So your time, your money, your business with that goal, that vision. So we come alongside as a guide and help you align your resources with what's important to you.
So like uh, when you get some birthday money or Christmas money.
They'll take it and they'll do it. Like, oh yeah. So what I understand is like when you get like birthday money or Christmas money, what you would you give it to them and then they'll take it and sort it out for you, or
Yes, so that's part of what we do. But before we do that, we would have a conversation about, what do you want to do with this money? Why is this important to you? When would you like to use it? What would you like to use it for? And then based off of those things, that would inform what we do with it. How, if we invest it or how we invest it, and tax planning. There's a lot of things that could go into it. It could be as simple as, yeah, I just want to use it for this one thing, so let's invest it accordingly. Or it could be as complex as later on you'll start learning about estate planning and things like that.
So what financial advice do I give you when you
buy
get
Bitcoin. Buy Bitcoin. I don't know what to do with all money. Buy Bitcoin.
but Jim would understand why. So okay, let's ask Jim his if you put your professional hat on and you're looking at the investment timeline of Lauren and any spare cash that should come her way, what would be the reasons, do you think, my motivations to tell her to buy Bitcoin so she can understand from someone else, not just good old dad?
Yeah, I would assume that you're not going to use this money for a long time, and that's really important when you consider how you should invest. And if you need that money tomorrow for something, it'd probably be, if you needed every ounce of that dollar tomorrow for whatever it is, you probably shouldn't buy Bitcoin with it or anything else with it, because you can't take that risk of that, the price or value of that changing between now and tomorrow. But you being young, you have a lot of time, so it allows you to uh, have to change the risk that you can take. So for you, it would actually be foolish to just keep all of your money in some sort of like fiat currency for a prolonged period of time, because there's monetary debasement over prolonged periods of time. So the purchasing power of that money would erode. Then versus Bitcoin, I think we're both under the impression, all three of us here are under the impression that Bitcoin over a long time will continue just to go up and will be a hedge against those other types of risks. So there's that, and also just the what we call time value of money, and that is basically the how compound interest can work over a prolonged period of time. And when we look at compound interest, time is really important. Obviously, there's just a few factors of that equation. There's time, there's rate of return, but the most important for you want to consider is just time. A lot of us don't have as much time on our hands that you do, and so you want to make sure you're using the most part of that equation as possible. So yeah, you could go spend it, and that's fine. Like if there's something that's really important to you, that's great. Don't shortchange yourself there, but certainly don't rob yourself of that time that you have, because we're trying to make the most of our rate of return and our capital invested when you have this great part of the equation to use. And time plus Bitcoin is really special.
That's the magic source. Like, so let's say over the next 10 years, over the course of next 10 years, you'll be, in 10 years time, you'll be 22.
That's pretty old.
Yeah, so if you stack as much Bitcoin as you can between now and the age of 22, like what that is going to give you in purchasing power is going to put you streets ahead of anybody else. Whereas for Jim and I, we're fathers, we're husbands, we've got 8 kids between us. Stacking, I would love to stack every penny I made for the next 10 years into Bitcoin and not worry about it, but it's different for us because we have to access a certain percentage of that dollar, which we earn.
You had to learn the hard way, basically.
We have learned the hard way because we had a lifetime of fiat before Bitcoin came along. Yeah, well, you learn the hard way when you enter the rabbit hole because you look back at all the mistakes you've made through the lens of Bitcoin. That's
just if I would have done X. And that's where listening to other people who have gone through it, you can glean a lot of wisdom just from listening and actually applying it.
Mm-hmm.
That we don't make the same mistakes that we did.
Well, do you have any further questions?
No.
Okay, go stack some Bitcoin.
I don't have any.
Go check your piggy bank.
Okay. See you. Bye. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks, mate. Right, yeah. So as always, loads to get into whenever chatting with Bitcoiners. I guess where I'd like to start is the traditional pathway that you'd have taken to get into financial planning, estate planning, whatever. There's different names for it. Whatever it is that you do, and then we'll concentrate on that flippening, most likely in your mind after finding Bitcoin, and the way that you're now trying to help your clients understand Bitcoin. So let's back it up. Let's find out what young Jim was doing growing up. What part of town, and what were mum and dad doing, and what were the influences in your life at that moment.
Yes, we'll go way back. I'm in Central Texas. I grew up in a pretty normal household. Ran around barefoot on the street, playing sports, and just having a lot of fun. It was great. We didn't have a ton of money, but my parents certainly made sure that we were taken care of and didn't go unfed by any means. Had a great childhood. But even as a kid, I remember thinking, hearing my parents and friends and their parents talk about, I've always wished that we could do X. I've always wished that we could go to Europe, or that we could do this thing as a family, but we just can't afford it. Yet seeing maybe like a satellite on top of their house, I'm thinking, I don't know how much satellite costs when I'm 12, but I would assume it costs something. And maybe if going to Europe is that important to you, what if you just went without satellite TV for a couple of years? Then you could go. And I just thought it was strange. People didn't seem to actually align what they said was important to them with the way they spent their money. And so even as an early age, that sort of caught me off guard. And I thought it was strange. And I didn't know there was a profession that helped people with that. But yeah, I continued to grow up. I got relatively obsessed with money at the end of high school and early college, to a very unhealthy degree. Fortunately, that changed pretty abruptly. But yeah, went to school, met my wife, got married at 22. I always romanticized being a poor newlywed, and we were poor newlyweds in, I think it's 2013, 2014. Our gross household income was right about 12 grand. So we were really poor. But it was tons of fun. Like a date night was sharing a pint of ice cream in our car watching a thunderstorm. It was simple. So I look back fondly on those times, but certainly don't want to be that poor again. But through that, it definitely caused me to really start thinking about what I want to do when I grow up, especially wanting to start having kids and stuff. So I sort of started revisiting those conversations and those thoughts about money and those misalignments. And I just started thinking about how, even the financial stress that Kendra, my wife, she and I started facing with being pretty pinched on what we could spend our money on. I just started thinking, wow, I would love to be able to help people have healthy conversations about their money and then actually use their money for what they say is important to them. money is the number one cause of divorce year after year. According to the American Psychology Association, it's basically been the number one cause of divorce every year they've ever done that poll for statistic for top causes. And I thought, wow, how amazing would it be able to actually help families if we could have healthier conversations about this? So I didn't know what a financial planner was or a CFP or those certificates or anything like that. I just knew that I would love to sit across the table with families and help them. So that's starting on this journey. I worked at a really large firm for a bit and grew and learned. I went to another small firm as a lead advisor after several years. And during that time, I became very opinionated on how I think things should be done. And that also coincided with me really going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. So I started buying Bitcoin around 2015, 2016, around that turn of year. But it was while I was at this other firm that I went from being someone who owned Bitcoin to being a Bitcoiner. And that became really hard to ignore in the way that I advise my clients. And the writing was on the wall that it was time for me to go ahead and start my own thing. And here we are.
All right. Okay. Now, you said at some point in there, and I think it was during your college days, that you got obsessed with money. Is that the word that you used?
Yeah, that's a good word for it.
What was going on?
It was from when I was real young. I remember being in second, third grade and starting small businesses to sell things to kids in my classes and stuff. And that never went away. And then there was fuel that was fed to that. So the end of high school, my family does this thing. My grandparents do this thing where I have a whole bunch of cousins. And my grandparents give one cousin at a time this real big book to read. It's called The Law of Success by Napoleon Hill. Napoleon Hill wrote a more famous book called Think and Grow Rich. Think and Grow Rich is the truncated version of The Law of Success. So anyways, when I was 17, I was given this book to read. You have 1 year to read it, and you write a report about it, and then you present your report to the family at Christmas. And you talk about what you learned and how you're going to apply it in life. And then once you've done that, grandparents give you a lump sum of money to be able to invest. So during that reading time, it's a lot about entrepreneurialism, and there's a lot of success stories with entrepreneurs and just different things like that. And I became, I started reading, I read that, then it led to me rereading it because I knew there's probably things I missed. And that led to me reading other books. Anyways, I took this, what could be a healthy pursuit of learning, and it went, I would certainly say it was overboard of being obsessed with money. I learned about how businesses can be run and how, personal finance can and should be run. But then I took it to an unhealthy place of just craving to build this empire or something that was not good, frankly. So I'm glad. It's really fun. Like, I look back now, and when I was at that time, I really wanted to have multiple companies. I wanted to own multiple companies that were in quasi-related industries, but not fully. But they're all under the same thread of a theme. And I look back now, and that's what I'm building. So like my financial planning company, it's called Intentional Living FP, as in financial planning. So intentional living. But I've also just started right now, about a week ago, started another company called Intentional Money. And that's more for people who need help with less deep financial planning work. And they shouldn't pay me what a client pays me for financial planning, but they still need help. That's more like budgeting and things like that. So that's Intentional Money. I have Intentional Leaders, and that's more for like business coaching and masterminds and things like that. I'm considering starting a hedge fund that would be Intentional Capital. And then I've already bought a bunch of domain names in case I ever want to start intentional getaways or intentional vacations or family retreats and stuff. So just having these groups of businesses with a theme of intentionality woven in. So it's really fun to look back now and how it's everything I wanted when I was a kid has come back full circle, but in a much healthier way. Like if 18-year-old Jim would have pursued these things the way that I wanted to then, I would never see my kids, and I would be a really bad husband if I were still married. But fortunately, I was snatched out of that. And now I have a great balance, and I definitely pursue these things, I think, with a much more level head and more pure pursuit.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. Intentional holidays. I think that's one thing that's there's a website for you. Go and grab that one before someone else does.
I appreciate that. I'll do that.
I know Andre Lojar from Free Madeira. He already has hodlerday.com, and Andre from South Africa is starting AirBTC, which is Airbnb but for Bitcoiners. So all of this stuff is going right. It's I love to see the creativity that gets spurred on by Bitcoiners once they free themselves, right? They get a little bit of time and they go back to what I believe is their default mode of entrepreneurship. Seeing an opportunity in the marketplace, somewhere that you can add value and put your skills to work. And it's exactly what you've done with your financial planning, right? You've brought all of your prior knowledge that you gained through. Oh, let's get some horror stories of fiat financial planning, because a lot of that is just a sales game, right? I mean, and I'm not saying that, you or in particular, any of the companies that you worked for might have engaged in some of that, but there are some pretty cowboyish antics going on out there in that world.
Yeah, it can be really frustrating. Like, even on Bitcoin Twitter, I take a lot of heat for being a financial planner. Actually, there's a podcast I was on it just came out last week with Luke Broyles, and a guy in the comments was raking me over the coals for being a financial planner and how it's just I'm a grifter. I'm really not sure what that means. Yeah, it's because there's this industry. I was telling your daughter, there's this industry that has an identity crisis, and it's really easy to go take a test. You can probably go study over a weekend and get yourself a life insurance license, and then you can put financial advisor on a business card and tell people that you are a financial advisor. And that's really confusing to people. If you go to someone, there's a lady in my office building who is that, and if someone on the street looks at us and says, "Oh, y'all are peers. Y'all do the same thing." We do totally different things. There's a big difference between a true financial planner and then a salesperson who just happens to sell financial products. And unfortunately, there's a lot of muddied water there. Yeah, gosh, as far as horror stories go, I was blown away when I first started working in this industry. I actually was just astounded by the conversations I would have. So I started keeping a legal pad of just tidbits of information from conversation I would have, just I thought were interesting and scary. Like there's a lot of scary statistics out there about how much money the average person has for an emergency fund, the average debt rate of the household, things like that. And trust me, I've talked to those people. Those statistics are true. I'm really jaded. It's hard for me to go out to a restaurant and not look around and think, yeah, most of these people here should not be here. They should be at home eating a peanut butter and jelly, because I've seen in their wallets. I know what's happening. So yeah, it's pretty astounding just where most people are from a savings rate, from a what they have accumulated thus far, what they're saving for currently, their thoughts on investing, their perception of risk. People don't know what risk means. Like, we've been spoon-fed how to invest. Like, oh, well, I've heard that I should do X, and this person on the radio said it's not risky. And maybe that person on radio is right, but they're probably not. So there's zero actual thinking in this. It's a whole bunch of anecdotal advice that was provided 30 years ago when maybe it made sense, that certainly does not apply to this to current days. So yeah, I'd be happy to share any particular stories, but I literally have a notebook full that one day I'll probably write a book about looking under the hood of the average family's financial life. It's very insightful and will make you squeamish.
Oh, and not only that, holds the mirror up against us, right? Because we've made a lot of I know I've made the mistakes. And I've had John Vallis on the show talking about this, because that was his job, right? He worked in China, Shanghai, for the best part of 5-10 years. I can't remember. Sorry, John. But basically selling to expatriates in and around Asia. And I would have been one of those people living in Singapore. And I didn't deal with John directly or his firm, but you get called up by the salespeople. First of all, the monkey on the phone, who's, his whole job is 50 phone calls a day, and you know, or out the back door. And he would just be calling around as many different names as possible just to try and book a meeting with the financial advisor from this big company, you know, Zurich, Aberdeen, Prudential, Allianz, you know, all of these big names, which come with baked in them with great reputation, right? Because we see them sponsoring all the sports events and whatever else, and they've got the big gleaming sign on the big gleaming building downtown in the central business district. Then all of a sudden, someone's calling you up to offer you a service and book your time and a meeting with their financial planner because they know that you are clearly of some upstanding kind of young upstart in this industry, and you're going to need some kind of help overlooking your finances because you're just too busy to do it yourself. Why don't you act like the rich people act and have someone else do that and look up? It's so scammy, but we fall for it so easily.
It's frustrating. So when I left a large firm to go to a smaller one, I probably spent 1.5 years looking at different companies to go to where they weren't like that. I'm really, really bad at sales. So I needed to go somewhere that I don't do any selling. My job is simply to do deep, good financial planning work because I'm actually good at that. I'm not good at many things, but I'm actually pretty good at that one thing. And so it took a lot of time. And as I was interviewing firms, there were multiple companies I got to that I had the job offered, and right before I took it, they wanted me to go to lunch with the owner of the firm. So I would go to lunch with them, and I'd pull up in my old cruddy car, and it wasn't a terrible car, but I'd pull up in it, and we'd be during lunch, we'd be sitting there talking, and the owner of the company would say, "Hey, about your car, you know, what we do here is we help people accumulate wealth. And because of that, they want to see that you are wealthy and that you have a nice car. So if you work here, you need to get rid of that. We need you to get an X, a Land Rover, a Mercedes, or whatever." And because that's the persona that we're trying to portray here. And both times that was said to me, that was the end of the relationship with me. And my job is not to create a facade, a persona of what wealth is supposed to look like. My job is to help people articulate what is important to them in life and then use their money for that in the most efficient and effective manner. And for me, I don't care about how my car looks. I care about having more time to spend with my family and be able to actually do the things that are important to me in that aspect. Who cares about my car? And to create this facade is so backwards and hypocritical. So yeah, there's a lot of scammy things there as far as putting on this false sense of security. It's this whole Wizard of Oz thing, you know, like, oh, this is projection of this super smart guy, but really it's just a normal dude behind a curtain, and no one can see who this normal guy is. And that's I am the antithesis of that. I am me to a fault. I am me always. The same me you see here on the podcast is the same me that you'll see in person at work, at my family, hanging out with friends. Yeah, so you're not going to get any duplicity in the way I behave. But I think that helps people. Like, there's not this fear of what's he really like, and is he scamming us? Like, I'm transparent. Anyways, that plays into how I run business. Yeah, whenever so I went from a large firm to a small firm, and finally I thought I found a firm that was just do good work, and I was really excited for that. But I got there and I got rug pulled. The moment I stepped foot there, I learned that, hey, actually, we're trying to grow to be this really large firm, probably for the benefit of wanting to sell out for a higher multiple down the line. And the way that we engage clients changed drastically. And it was very clear that it was not up to the standard of engagement that I would like. And that's why I had to go and start this, which was a lot of fun. I started this early 2021, and it's been nice not having to sell. When I started this, I was pretty much financially dependent myself. So I didn't have to worry about having to bring on clients. It was a matter of, am I the best fit for you? And are you the best fit for me? If not, I can tell you that. I wasn't under this microscope of a sales manager. So no, I've sent away a lot of clients. I've probably sent away more clients than I've brought in, telling them that I'm not the best fit. And that removes any pressure of having to, again, put on this facade, but rather truly tell someone, yes, I actually believe that I can help you in the most efficient way compared to these other people. So yeah, that's helpful, especially for a bad salesperson like me. I'm not trying to sell. I'm just being honest, and whatever that looks like. So it's helpful.
Yeah, and yeah, man, that's such a shame that happened to you at that smaller company. But that's exactly what happens, right? As soon as somebody gets the idea of, oh, we've got to sell out for a big amount of money here, then the business model shifts to caring about the customer to just get as many customers' names in the database as possible, because database is what the company that buys us out is ultimately buying.
Yeah, it's sad because the thing that made you something that should be a sellable asset suddenly gets flipped, but the large private equity companies don't have the time to look and see, like, all right, what was allowing to really bring on clients who are going to be sticky clients versus bring on clients who are just a number on the balance sheet right now. And that's not sustainable. I've had a lot of clients follow me from other firms because of that exact reason. Oh, they used to be great, but now they never talk to me. They don't call me anymore. And it's like, well, let's see what's going on with them. Oh, it looks like they just sold. Yeah. And that's really sad. Like, you should probably just take care of the people that are with you. It's they're not a number. These are people you're talking with. I don't care if they have 50 grand or 50 million. It's everything they have. And that's really important to me. I get choked up anytime I think about, like, especially when we talk about like Bitcoin and inflation and the problems that Bitcoin solve. One of my most sobering things to think about is like elderly women who maybe their husbands predeceased them and now they're stuck with a pension. Maybe their pension either has no cost of living adjustment or a minimal 1 to 2 annual COLA associated with it. And it's sad. Like, these women have next to nothing and maybe have $30,000 from an old 401k saved up, and they're living off a pension. And every time that their insurance and their property taxes and their groceries go up, they get squeezed just a little bit more. Before you know it, they're not running their AC despite it being 106 out, and they're eating hot dogs 3 times a day. And it's sad to think, one, about that itself, and then two, how many financial planners overlook that and say, you don't have enough money for me to care about you. Go find someone else. It's like, gosh, that's everything they have. That's really sobering. And yeah, that's, even with these other firms I've worked at, the writing was on the wall that I've got to go. Like, if I can't tell my parents that, hey, you should work with these advisors, they're going to do you well, then it means that why would I send someone else there? Yeah, obviously my clients pay me to care about their money, and I've studied way too much to not care about their money, and that's what they pay me for. But I care about you, the people, way more. Your money is just a tool to help you do what's important to you in life, and I really care about those things. Like, I have such an honored position in people's lives. This year alone, I've had probably 10 to 15 clients tell me, hey, Jim, we're expecting a baby, our first or second, we're expecting a baby, but don't tell me, we haven't told anyone else yet. Like, what an honored role that is to have in someone's life. They would come in and confide that in me. And I don't take that lightly.
Yeah. It's funny. That was one of the first phone calls I made to the financial planner I'd been paired up with in Singapore, when we found out that we had twins on the way, because I was shitting myself, basically. And I'm like, what the hell? Because, all of the financial planning I've done beforehand, included the family that I had under my nose at the time. I wasn't expecting to double down on my kids quota, which obviously started blowing up everything that we'd already spoken about. It's like, we're going to have to make some huge adjustments here. And yeah, so
kids will break all of your models.
Oh, don't they just, mate? All of your models, all your sleep models are broken, especially in those first 6 months. I'd be interested to know, actually, like the average age of people that are coming to, financial advisors, because so many millennials are jaded. Gen X, probably our generation. I don't know how old you are. we were still not as jaded. And if you'd managed to land yourself a half decent career, you know, pre-internet days before everything went completely transformational, and you could have you could do well for yourself. But millennials and Gen Z obviously aren't there yet. Jaded towards money, jaded towards careers, lifetime careers, for example. You know, it's not a thing. They don't see that those opportunities that their parents and certainly grandparents would have experienced. What age group are coming to you for, you know, financial planning, and what kind of demographic?
So up until about 9 months ago, I didn't take clients who were over the age of 45. I now allow for older clients, more traditional clients, as of about 9 months back. As I plan on bringing another financial planner in the next few months, and they will specialize with people who are about to retire or just retired. So long-term goal is to have about 15 certified financial planners here at our firm, each of them specializing in different groups. So I want to have 2 to 3 advisors working with retirees and working with business owners and working with equity compensated executives and working with younger families pursuing early financial freedom. So anyways, I want to have these different niches and specializations within our company. So when I first started this, I only allowed for, frankly, families a lot like my family. So young families who are pursuing early financial freedom, primarily for the purpose of time freedom with their family. So that's who I started working with. And again, now I'm bringing on other clients to make room for new advisors who come in. So at this point, keep in mind the demographics are a little bit skewed because the first 2 years of being picky on who are brought on. So at this moment, my average client is about 34 to 35-year-old married couple with 2 to 4 kids. About 80% of our clients own businesses, and about 70% of them own real estate outside of their primary residence. They typically want financial freedom or work optionality by their mid 40s to early 50s, not because they hate their job, but because they just want more freedom and flexibility to be where they want to be and do what they want to do with who they want to be with. So that's who we work with. Now, as far as the jaded thought, one, it helps. So like going back to that demographic, what I just described is me. So I'm 33. My wife is 34. We have 4 kids. I own a few businesses. I would love to not have to work by the time I'm 45. Again, not because I don't like what I do. I love what I do. It's just I want that freedom to say, okay, I want to go backpack with my kids for the next 6 months, and I don't have to worry about what my boss has to say about that. So that's who we work with. But I've seen these things firsthand from people my age, and I've experienced it. This sense of caution, and we've been burned by a lot. You know, our formative years were sort of highlighted with financial scandal. I grew up, I lived in Houston as a kid, right when Enron was taking place. Like, we have family friends who worked with Enron. So I saw that firsthand, the scandal of fraud in the financial system. My dad worked for WorldCom. I don't know if you're familiar with WorldCom, but it's just as up there with Enron. It's probably the number one largest financial fraud and accounting fraud in corporate America history. My dad worked there. Now, he wasn't some high up. He certainly wasn't one of the people baking the books or anything like that. But man, he lost a lot of money in his 401k plan because all these people were telling everyone who worked for WorldCom, hey, you should put all your money in WorldCom stock in your 401k plan. My parents and a lot of their friends lost a lot of money because of that. So that impacted my family personally. I mean, the great financial crisis, 07, 08, 09, that area, that was right when I was graduating high school and starting college. I had friends who couldn't go to college because their college savings plan or their family's financial, entire livelihood just got demolished right when it's time for them to go off to school. I had friends who had to drop out because of that. We graduated in 2012 when things were still recovering and not that great. Now where we're at a place, like people my age in their early 30s, like we're at a place now that you should really start accumulating wealth, yet we're being squeezed so much. Fortunately, again, I didn't grow up with a ton of money, but my parents were amazing and made sure that my brother and I weren't strapped with student loan debt. but most of my friends have a lot of student loans. And what you're witnessing right now is, a few years ago here in the US, student loans were, at least federal student loans were frozen. And a few years ago, let's say your student loan was $400 a few years back, and you were making it okay. It wasn't terrible. You were able to go get your avocado toast and go out to brunch with your friends sometimes and pay your student loans. And then when COVID happened and everything shut down, well, suddenly your student loan payments were frozen and you got those COVID relief checks. So if you think back to like March, April 2020, all these kids who had $400 student loan debt, suddenly that $400 a month is available and they're all feeling rich. That's why people started just throwing money around. Like the amount of home remodels and stuff was through the roof because we had free money. And over time, as we know, like when money is printed, it's not free. It's just going in one way and then back out the other, and it's hurting people. Obviously, the further you are away from the money printer, the more it hurts you. So all these kids who have this $400 student loan payment frozen, they're feeling rich. But over the last couple of years, it felt like I have $400 a month in excess, now $3, now $2, and all of a sudden here we are at current day, and everyone's barely making it. They're barely scraping by. And man, the pin, it hadn't even dropped yet. The pin hadn't dropped yet for student loans. They start coming back in just a few weeks. So I can't imagine most people between their mid-20s to mid-40s who are right now, I can barely do it. They're about to get smacked with reality. There goes gravity. Those student loan payments it's going to be just possibly the needle that breaks the camel's back. And I'm scared. I feel really bad for most of my peers. And that's just another thing. Like we're at a place where you should be accumulating wealth and starting to allow, like I'm making more money. I can save. I have a lot of kids to pay for, but I'm strapped. I've got to move back with my parents. Like, oh gosh, we've got to go back down to a single car family or whatever. And I think that, each generation is probably going to get more and more jaded. Like I can't imagine. Can you imagine being like maybe 10 years younger and your first exposure to money was that money's just printed and given out? Like that'd be a weird thing to think. Like that was not an expectation when we were young. But that precedent has been set, and it's hard to undo the free money game once it's been done. And that's, I think you and I would both agree that it's pretty much inevitable that there will be some sort of universal basic income down the line. I'd venture to say in the next 10 years, because they have set a precedent with these new generations of an expectation for free money and the need to live off the government's handouts.
Oh man. So in a few weeks' time, these student loans come back and hit people's bottom lines, going to hit the bottom of their pockets pretty hard. What happens if an individual just throws in a towel and says, I can't pay this back, there's no way in the world, and starts defaulting on it? What then?
Well, then you're in trouble. You can't declare bankruptcy against student loan debt. It's one of the few things that can't just be wiped off a balance sheet. So yeah, when it comes down to, I have like friends and family and clients who are wanting to buy a new car right now, and I'm encouraging them maybe just wait 3 or 4 months. I bet there's gonna be a lot of cars sitting around for sale because people are gonna get really squeezed, and you've got to make that payment one way or another. And I think that people are gonna start selling other assets to be able to just get by some more. It's terrible. There's so much that we've been fed, like this. That could go into the education thing itself. Like most people, again, I think that's impacted just what we've witnessed. I think most people my age fall in line with where I am, as far as like most clients I talk to are not gung-ho about saving in a 529 like college savings plan. Because what we've witnessed is we were told, hey, if you don't go to college right after high school, you're a failure. And you look like an idiot to all your friends, and you walk the stage and they don't say that you're going to go to X school, whatever, you failed in life. But I think most people my age are starting to realize that, maybe that wasn't all true. So most of my clients are not just fully funding a 529 plan. It's more of like, maybe I should be just, saving in Bitcoin or whatever, having something that's a little bit more free and flexible. If my kids want to use this to start a business or travel for business inspiration, I want that available there. So I think there's just so much, we had a lot of preconceived notions that were just fed down to us that are starting to get unveiled for what they really are.
It's a racket is what it is. It's a disgusting racket. And when you look at how wealthy these universities are, they're running funds of billions of dollars.
Yeah, the thing is, you see a lot of schools who have just ridiculous degrees as well. Like, you can go to school and get a degree in like youth camp or underwater basket weaving. It's like, dude, you'd be way better off going and just being an apprentice if you're going to do those things. But the universities have to know that that's a scam. But it's in their best interest to offer that major and know that we'll get a few students who want to study these things, instead of saying, hey, instead of coming here and paying us loads of money, just go find someone who can mentor you in that field. Even if it's unpaid. Heck, I'd rather take an unpaid mentorship than fork out 30 grand a year to go and learn a trade in a classroom. Go learn it firsthand. So I think a lot of people are starting to realize, those sorts of things, and the value of maybe actually going and getting your hands dirty versus just simply sitting in a classroom and being fed something by a professor who's may or may not have actually done that thing itself.
Precisely. Oh man, precisely the conversations I have with my oldest daughter, who's set her sights. She's going to go traveling for a year, but she set her sights on going to university. And I'm like, why? What are you buying? Tell me what you're buying, and then break that down per hour. What are you paying per hour? Because some of these courses are like 6-hour lectures a week. I'm like, what? So then how does it cost that much? Lectures that you can watch on YouTube.
Exactly. I think that is coinciding with this jaded view of things, is coinciding with YouTube and podcast perfectly with, wait, what am I paying for? I'm paying for a piece of paper, because you can't tell me that you're paying for the knowledge and the discussions. You can get that for free. You're literally paying for this piece of paper to say, look at me, I'm smart. And is that really worth the next 30 years of indentured servitude? I don't think so.
And Jim, it's the same as fiat dollars, right? Fiat dollars get inflated into the system, which debases the value of all of the other fiat dollars that are already in the system. It's the same with these certificates, these paper certificates that are printed into the system come the end of your school year. Well, before you, there was another 1 million printed into the system, and another 1 million the year before that, and another. It's the same concept. Like they're getting more and more worthless, but at the same time, more and more expensive in dollar terms. So your purchasing power with your piece of paper in the frame on the wall is forever going down.
Yeah, again, that comes with proof of work versus proof of stake. I mean, the work itself is much less than it used to be. You can go get a degree pretty darn easily. So therefore, like the output necessary to obtain this thing, just it's certainly not as existent as it used to be. You'd see like 100 years ago, you had a high school diploma. That was a big deal. Then like, I went to college. Like, that was a big deal. Now it's, I had my master's, I have my doctorate, I have multiple master's degrees, I have all of these things. It's because it's being inflated away. We're suddenly, $1,000 is not what $1,000 used to be. Now you need $5,000. A bachelor's degree isn't what it used to be. Now I need a bachelor's and a master's plus this other thing. It's inflation of the appearance of education, just like it's the inflation of appearance of wealth. Like, those aren't real dollars. That's not real education. It's a facade that is meant to represent something, but it's when you have manipulated signal and manipulated communication means, it changes everything. And that's what money itself. Money is meant to communicate value across space and time, and a degree is meant to communicate a sense of education and knowledge that can translate to different people and say, look, I've done the work. Here it is. Look, I've done the work. Here's my money. I've done the work. Here's my degree. That's been inflated away because everyone knows that how valuable is that piece of paper really? I need 4 pieces of paper for you now. So yeah, I think it's all of these things mixing to say, maybe I shouldn't stack degrees. Maybe I shouldn't stack fiat. I need to go find something else that I have proof of work rather than just proof of stake on.
Yeah, for sure. All right. At the beginning of this show, you talked about divorce, the number one reason for divorce rate. Well, the highest signifier, I guess is the word I'm looking for, of divorce is money. And again, interesting that should come up because anecdotally, a few months ago, we were sitting around the dinner table and one of my daughters was explaining that her best friend's parents are splitting up, just boom, out of nowhere. No one saw this coming, yada, yada, yada. And of course, in my caring manner, I turned around and said, Bitcoin fixes divorce. And bam, off goes that was a triggering event at the dinner table, let's just say the very least. Bitcoin doesn't fix everything. Why the hell do you have to say that? Blah, blah, blah. And I let that happen. And I said, well, I want a chance to explain myself as to why I believe Bitcoin fixes divorce. And I'm sure you'd agree that it lowers time preference. It gives people a much clearer vision over their finances. They can plan a lot easier for the future. And you're not running that 1,000 miles an hour just to stand still on the hamster wheel, juggling all the plates of daily life and managing a relationship as well at the same time. Fiat money destroys all of that. It's a sickness.
Yeah, what it comes down to is a lot of times it's sad because people think people want the same things, but there's so much miscommunication amongst spouses. And it's amplified all the more by having money that also mixes those communication signals. It's like, hey, I want to make sure, like I've had countless clients cry in my office because the stress that they're under and the amount of fighting that they have and the personal stress they're going through. And once we get it on the table, it's usually they're after relatively the same thing, but it's just being come from in totally different angles. Like for instance, this story sticks with me because it was one of the earlier times. It was like, wow, this is real. And there's a family that they were on the verge of getting a divorce. I found out later that they came to me and that was their last ditch effort to get on the same page. Otherwise, they're calling it quits in their marriage. And they have a few kids, and it would have been devastating. But what was happening was every time they go on a trip, the wife would want to do all the things. They go to Disney World. She wanted to buy the funnel cake and the turkey leg and get the Mickey Mouse ears and just do everything and live it up. The husband didn't want to do those things. He wanted to make sure that they enjoyed the trip, but it was simple so they could go on more trips. And what we talked through more and more was, well, I just want to make sure the kids are having the most of their time with us. And how one spouse looked at it was, well, making the most of this time with us is through highlighting this one trip. And the other spouse was, well, if we can make the most of time with us, it's by having more money available for more things. I was like, oh, well, what y'all want is the same thing. You want memories with your family. Like, let's start with that. And unfortunately, most people don't come from it with actually pulling back the layers. Like, what are we really getting at here? You know, I hear people talk about all the time, like, oh, I want to be able to retire early by the time I'm 45. And if you take that as face value for their goal, they're probably going to be miserable. And I've seen this firsthand hundreds, if not thousands of times of, people are really wealthy and they look like they're successful in pretty much every aspect. Then I start asking like, hey, you made a lot of money. What made you want to do this? Why did you decide that you want to own a business and sell it one day or be a doctor and blah, blah, blah? And usually the story is something along the lines of, oh, well, when I was a kid, my parents fought about money all the time and I had to hear it. We didn't eat the best food. We had terrible clothes, a lot of hand-me-downs, and it just wasn't a good childhood. So when I was 10, 11, 12, I decided that I want to make sure that my kids had a better childhood than I had. And to do that, I want to make sure I can provide that for them in a way that my parents didn't for us. So then we're in my office and these people are usually older. It's like, well, how was it? how was the childhood? You made the money. So how was being a parent? How was the childhood for your kids? And the vast majority of the time, they sit back for the first time and just, I don't know. I guess they had a lot of stuff. We went on some good trips, but really, I don't know if it was a good childhood. Now that I think about it, I went around for them as much as I hoped I could be, I guess. I was at work a lot. What a shame. Like when you were little, you said, I want this so my kids have a good childhood. But all you did was provide this surface level thing that made the appearance of good childhood. And you missed the mark anyways. And that's a lot like Bitcoin. Like people get into Bitcoin, not because, well, you get into it a lot of times because number go up, but you stay in it because you start pulling these layers back of like, what really is money? What's going on here? So once you start asking why and really what is happening, you get the root, the root cause, the level one base principles. And if you're going to identify anything in life of value, you've got to go back to those first principles. And again, most people live on the peripheral and therefore miss the actual thing of value in their life, and it's really, really sad. And I think Bitcoin will help with this because it certainly does help the whole time preference issue. When you're sitting on fiat, you tend to spend a lot more, and when you start spending and one spouse wants this thing, the other spouse wants this thing, and you're not actually having conversations about why do we want these things, you're just gonna get really frustrated with each other. And eventually it's gonna add up and compound, and eventually just ends in an explosion of divorce, versus checking in regularly and saying, hey, what's important to us in life? Is our money being used for that? And I think you and I would agree that Bitcoin is a lot more accommodating to those conversations than the melting ice cube of fiat.
It certainly is, but well, let's go there. Let's take it to an under discussed topic, I think, in the Bitcoin space. Generally, the male spouse is going to find Bitcoin. We need more women in Bitcoin. We all know that. And he starts falling down the rabbit hole and going a little bit crazy. Surrounded by books, surrounded by YouTube, surrounded by podcasts. Changes within a matter of weeks, because now all of a sudden he's not in the dip in the sofa next to his wife watching their favorite drama together, because it's fucking pointless to him now. It doesn't make any sense to be wasting my time watching this stuff. Instead, he's off in an office in a dark corner somewhere just listening to a podcast on 2.5 speed just because he wants all of the information.
There's some guy right now who's listening to this, looking around.
And this is why I want to have this conversation, because once one person starts seeing that, because this is still money, right? Well, this is actual money. This is real money now. This isn't the fiat stuff anymore. The fiat stuff that's caused all the arguments and the angst in the past. The one person in that relationship can see now, we got to change this. All of this shit has to stop. Canceling Netflix, canceling Spotify, doing all of the things, not going out for the Starbucks $7 coffee anymore, selling the extra car or downgrading this, wanting to sell the house to downgrade and clear some debt. A complete 180 on somebody's personality. We've all experienced it. This also weighs on a relationship. And I wonder how many people out there are suffering with this problem, with loneliness as well, because you might be the only guy in town that has seen this, has done the work, has read the books, has listened to the podcasts and all of that. You could be the only one in your extended family within your friend group. And you have to carry all of that burden yourself. So I'm imagining there are some very explosive arguments still about money at the dinner table, especially when one of the people, generally the man there, is buying Bitcoin, this invisible, intangible asset that gets slammed on mainstream media all of the time. There's a lot of hurting plebs out there, I think.
Yeah, you've for those relationships specifically and those conversations, like, you have to remember you have to remember to be patient. Like, you didn't understand it at one point. You were blind to these things. That's probably where your spouse is. Like, just because you know something now doesn't mean that everyone else around you knows it or is obligated to know it at the same time as you. So be patient, have grace, and have conversations. Approach those things with the hope of educating, not browbeating. You know, there is a place in time of coming down a little bit more harshly. But that's I would say that's the exception, not the norm. Most people need to be met with where they're at. Like, I have the opportunity to orange pill a whole lot of people. Most people I work with are normal people prior to meeting me. And then I introduce them to Bitcoin. They weren't Bitcoiners prior, for the most part. And I think I've sort of found the secret sauce to orange pilling people. And it's just listening, asking questions truly for the sake of learning where they are and helping them understand at a place that they can pick it up. And that needs to happen with spouses. And you have to approach it not just as like this whole money thing. It has to be, you have to go back to like, why, like what's important to you? What are we here for? Like, what do you really want to do with our life? And how do we make sure that we're in alignment with these things? Like, I married you for a purpose. We committed our lives together for a purpose. Like, let's not lose that. What are we doing? And yeah, like, you can tie that back into Bitcoin. But you have to be gracious, and you have to approach it from a place of meeting them where they're at. It's like my clients, whenever I orange pill a client, it's a pretty simple formula. I don't do it up front. I've been on a lot of podcasts, and you know, people listen to me on podcast or whatever, and they'll go to my website, and then I'll get an email or something saying, "Hey, you said you like Bitcoin, but it's not anywhere on your website. Like, you're a fraud." It's like, no. I just don't talk about Bitcoin a lot on my financial planning website because I don't want people to have a preconceived notion about what I do. I don't want to scare them off. I want to invite them in. So for clients, I don't even talk about Bitcoin until we're multiple meetings in, until I've gained their trust and shown value through tax planning and these other things. And then we'll talk through investments. It's like, oh, by the way, there's this weird thing about me and the way we advise you should probably know about. And I just introduce them to Bitcoin. And first I open up. I just ask them, like, so with Bitcoin, what do you know about this? What have you heard? What do you think? And I'm inviting them to just get it all out. There's a book called Never Split the Difference by a guy named Chris Voss. He was the top FBI negotiator for a long time. And he talks about tactics to disarm people. And that's one of them. It's just basically allow them to get all of their qualms on the table. That way they're not sitting there. If they don't get it on the table first and you're just telling them all about your answers, they're not hearing your answers. They're thinking about their rebuttal the whole time. Mm-hmm. So just let them get their rebuttal out. Hey, just, what do you know? Oh, it's Silk Road and whatever. It's drug money. Or I used it when I was in high school to buy pot. Or it's going to boil the oceans. Or terrorists use it. Whatever. Like, just let them get it out there. That way they can actually hear you fully. And I'm not going to sit there and tell them about like the code and how hash rate works and stuff. It's just like, okay, let's make this palatable. We have to start with, what is Bitcoin? How do we arrive at the solution? And we have to start with peeling back those layers again of, well, let's start from the beginning. What is money? What are stores of value historically? And then we're just going to march through history. This isn't an hour session. It's 6 minutes of marching through what are historical forms of money and stores of value. And then how do we arrive at these digital currencies? And how do we arrive at Bitcoin, not these other ones? And in order, that's the thing, a lot of people are sitting there trying to decide between Bitcoin versus Ethereum versus the new one that's going to come out. And because they're looking for an answer without asking first what question is being addressed when an answer was created. And if you go there, like, well, Bitcoin was created to answer something specific. And if you remind yourself of what that question was, the answer is clear. So that's what I help remind our clients of. And really, it's less of a reminder, more of a first time they're thinking about it. I get a lot of flack from other financial planners for talking about Bitcoin, a whole bunch. And what I've realized at first, it was really frustrating, and I didn't understand why. Because these are smart people. A lot of people I've respected for years who are great at managing wealth. And what I realized recently was my peers who are super smart and great financial planners is they're really good at helping people manage their money, but I don't think many of them ever stop to think, what is money? And you have to go there. You can be a shallow Bitcoiner who's in it for a number go up and not really understand what is money. But if you're one of the people who stick around for a bear cycle or two, you've probably already chewed on that question a bit. And that's my goal is if you're someone who's not going to be in it for the long haul, you will get burned. I have seen that countless times. People who buy it at 18,000, it drops to 5, or people who buy at 60,000 and they sell it at 20. And you have to have conviction, and conviction is birthed out of education. So that's where we start with our clients. And I hope, even when you go there with your spouse, if they don't understand, if they're not being met with where they're at, you might be able to get them on board initially because they're going to have grand visions of being rich. But the moment this thing starts going down a little bit in price, they're going to be thinking, hey, wait a second, what's going on? We're going to sell it now. And you've got to make sure y'all are on the same page, education wise. Doesn't mean like, heck, my wife doesn't care about reading all these books that I do, but at least she understands why we're in it. Like if I kick the bucket, she's not going to go sell her Bitcoin because she understands it to the extent that she needs and desires.
It's interesting you bring up getting flagged from other financial advisors, because those that shout the loudest are the ones that have the most to lose, I would say, because they know at least this about Bitcoin: it obsoletes them, right? If they're just smashing and grabbing front-loaded commission from one of the companies that I mentioned earlier, they know that this game is going to be run out of town, because there's no way they can sell you a Bitcoin plan, right? The Bitcoin plan is, here's a book, go and read it, come back and ask me more questions about it, and we will figure out a way for you to take a certain percentage of your wealth and put it into that for a long time to come. And we're not going to rebalance your portfolio, and I'm not going to get commission every time I tell you to do this, that, and the other thing. So that again would be, to me, a big red flag if you were to walk into, for those listening that are having financial advice, if you're facing someone that is really beating it down angrily, then be very, very aware of the incentives behind that. And if it's all the FUD, the usual FUD as well, it's like they've done zero. But they should not be in that game. They should not be financially advising people if they're just mimicking mainstream media about the bad things about Bitcoin. It is their job, their livelihood, to have done the research into this asset that's been around for 14 years. And if they cannot give you a better answer than, oh, it's bad for the environment, therefore don't touch it, you're in the wrong office.
I'm part of a group of advisors who are great people, smart people. They're people who are generally very anti-traditional finance, like commissions and sales heavy. It's people who are typically like actually really invested in their clients' lives. And that's why I really respect these people for years. And I admire their willingness to try new things and find what's best. But again, for some reason, they stop short at Bitcoin. And I think I regularly revisit in my head that meme of the IQ Bitcoin adopters. And there's too many people who are up here IQ level, and maybe I'm low IQ and I've adopted because of that, whatever. But yeah, it's sad and frustrating. Actually, a few months ago, every once in a while, I'll poke the bear on those chat forums about Bitcoin just to try to get them to think about it every once in a while. And a few months ago, I mentioned Bitcoin and the halving. Actually, it was Pierre Richard posted there's a chart that he has for like the four phases of a halving. And I posted that on there. And I mentioned that, this is very informative as to how and why we look at like how we approach our Bitcoin accumulation strategy at our firm. And man, I just got destroyed in the comments on that. People tell me that I'm a big chart follower and tulips and beanie babies and all the normal FUD. So I put it out there sort of as a joke, but I would have really taken it. I mentioned that, all right, VTI at that time was trading at like $100 and change per share. And Bitcoin at that point was like 18,000, something like that. And I said, hey, why don't we give ourselves, according to this chart, like let's go ahead and give ourselves to December of 2025. and I'll buy 10 shares of VTI. You buy $1,000 worth of sats, and whoever's is worth more at the end of the day, the loser has to give them the other person's asset. And no one took me up on that. So I think there's a lot of talk, but a lot of people, when they start looking at, okay, yeah, this thing can't be tulips because it keeps coming back. This thing can't be Beanie Babies because it's, yeah, just there's a lack. And I think when you actually start having intellectual honesty, you're forced to confront. And some people, when they're forced to confront this thing, say, all right, let's dive in. Other people just retreat further and dig their heads further in the sand. But yeah, I'm trying to orange pill more financial planners by the day, and we'll see. It is interesting to think what hard money will obsolete. Like right now, I hate, like one of the biggest planning problems that I face is when someone says, especially a couple of years ago when housing prices were just skyrocketing, year over year, is, hey Jim, we want to buy a house in 2 years. What do we do with our savings for that? It's like, dang, that's a tough one. Like, do you keep it in cash? Like where I live, our house appreciated by 32% in 2022. If you saved in cash, you just lost 30%, 32% of your house that you were going to buy just got washed away. Do you throw it in bonds? Like, that's a terrible idea. Do you drop it in the stock market? Frankly, do you drop it in Bitcoin with that short of a time horizon? Like, that's a really hard question that should not be necessary. If we had money that just did its job of storing value across time, just say, just put it in money, save the money. And that's where Bitcoin, obviously Bitcoin is volatile right now. If you understand adoption rates of any big technology, you'll understand why it's volatile in price or in purchasing power. That's how we should word this. It's volatile in purchasing power. That should be expected with any early stage technology. But once Bitcoin reaches more maturity, then Bitcoin will be the place to say, don't try to invest it. Just buy Bitcoin. Bitcoin is money. Bitcoin is savings. Just park it there. We can buy that house in 2 years. We're not trying to figure out the stock market and risk and all that. Keep it simple. That will obsolete a lot of tasks of a financial planner. And that's awesome. I welcome that. How much better would people's financial lives be if they didn't have to pay someone to answer that stupid question because their money is being debased?
Yeah, it takes up so much time of everybody's day. I mean, it's living rent-free in your head the whole time, right? We're always thinking about money or the fiat currency in which you are paid, for what you expend your time and energy for. I'd be interested to know how you came across it. Did we do like the rabbit hole story? I don't think so. Might have quickly touched on it, but what was that eureka moment for you?
Well, I first heard about it in 2012. I worked with a guy who asked our boss all the time to pay us in Bitcoin, but I'm pretty confident that guy was stoned at all times, including at work. So I didn't put much weight into what he had to say. So I definitely filed that one away. And it was the first podcast I ever stumbled on was the Investors Podcast. We study billionaires with Preston and Stig. And I remember, probably it was 2015. They did a show they talked about Bitcoin briefly, but it was nowhere near where Preston's at now with Bitcoin fundamentals in that show specifically. It was just this more of a thought exercise about what if and what is Bitcoin. And that rekindled like, hey, I remember that crazy guy I used to work with mentioned this thing. So that made me go and start looking at it more. And I started buying a little bit here and there. And then, it's sort of stuck with me. I mean, I was working in finance, obviously, in 2017. I remember the ICOs. I remember seeing people in their 70s and 80s mortgaging their house when Bitcoin was at 16, 17, 18,000 so they could go buy more Bitcoin, on their house. And that's scary to think about. There was a lot of speculation and hype around that period. And that again rekindled this, wait, what is this thing again? Now that did take it more of a, okay, is this thing a lot of hype and speculation? But then finally in 2020, when the money printers really started turning on, that's what lit me up, was this doesn't make any sense. Why should any central authority be able to dictate how much money is in circulation? You are manipulating and hijacking the communication signals when you do that. And that really started getting to me. There's too many yeah, there's too many obstacles and things you had to jump through suddenly, like the debasement of currency and what if this and then that. And that was met with all the stuff, everything else that came along with COVID, the policies and surveillance and all that stuff. And it was, all right, I need something that I can opt out of this other thing with and find something a little bit better. So I started looking at gold or other forms of hard money, and I tried to figure out which one do I think would be best. And yeah, it came down to Bitcoin, especially when I started chewing on the thought of, well, what if there is a CBDC that will be used primarily for surveillance under the guise of ease of access? And then it was like, all right, we've got to find some sort of money that is that you can opt out of these things with. I've been telling clients that for years. The whole, CBDCs will be met with some sort of social credit score based off of these factors. And 3 years ago, you sound like a lunatic. And I think nowadays, people are starting to wake up like this is pretty much inevitable. And it's fun. It's a fun time to be a conspiracy theorist because your great track record as of late. Yeah, that's how I became about Bitcoin. It pretty much became inevitable in my head early 2020. And that's when I haven't owned a normal stock since then. It's about March of 2020. At that point, my wife and I, we put all of our money in Bitcoin or a few publicly traded Bitcoin miners, and that's what we hold today. So any free cash flow that I have goes either back into our businesses or goes to buy Bitcoin. And yeah, I'm young and I like that. I think those investing myself in my businesses in Bitcoin, I think are the most asymmetric investment opportunities that I'll see in my lifetime.
So if you've got a client in front of you and they're like, okay, Jim, you sold me on this idea. Thank you. We've spent 10 hours coming back and forth over the last 6 to 9 months or whatever. Maybe they've read a few resources that well, that's a question in itself. What do you recommend if people are interested? They're in front of you in the office. You see that there's that glimmer of interest. What do you then do? Where do you lead them?
Yeah. So again, I'm not trying to shove this thing down their throats. So what I do is we have that conversation about, again, first off, hey, this is something you should know about as we talk about investments. There's this weird thing about me. And I lead off like that. There's this weird thing that you should know. That way I disarm them and let them know, hey, I recognize that this is probably weird. And then again, I ask them and invite them to share, what do you know about this thing? So that's a further disarming. What do you know? And then again, it's not this aggressive, you should buy it because number go up or whatever. I just march them through what question are we trying to answer? And then we go back to the history of money. And then we arrive at Bitcoin. And then after we've done that, they're most of the time like, okay, I get it now. How much of this should I buy? But I don't let them stop there. Say, here, well, here, let's make sure that conviction is really settled in. So then I follow up and I send them 2 podcast episodes. It's the first 2 episodes of Preston Pish's Bitcoin Fundamentals. There's one with Robert Breedlove, and there's another one with, I can't remember who it was. It was episode 1 and 2 of that podcast. I say, just listen to these 2. And I have a few clients who are even more curious. And I say, hey, if you really want to learn some more, and I'll also mail them a copy or send them a copy of Audible of the Bitcoin Standard if they really want to go there. Because I'm trying to reinforce understanding. So that's where we'll go. But typically, they're chomping at the bit to start accumulating Bitcoin after that monologue I provide them about the history of money. But yeah, those other things just to reinforce.
Do they want to go straight to the asset, or is there a cohort of people that might be more interested in when is the ETF coming? Or perhaps you could use MicroStrategy for those people that are more comfortable entering public markets, or like you said, mining companies. Or is it no, go and open an account here, there, or whatever, or go peer-to-peer? What's that? What's that mix of kind of response when people actually realize that they want to be exposed to Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's pretty much always they want to own some directly. And we'll talk about how do you get exposure to Bitcoin? How do you buy it? And this is now we're getting multiple conversations in as far as we have set conversations with how do you buy Bitcoin, asset allocation standpoint. Bitcoin maxis, you're going to laugh at me, but I get laughed at on the other end of the spectrum from financial planners. So historically, our average client has about 20% of their total investable assets in Bitcoin. Which again, from a Bitcoin maxi standpoint, like that's probably embarrassing, but from a financial planner perspective, that is also embarrassing, I guess, on the other side of things. Right now, and this is part of like our accumulation strategy that we're talked through with the halving cycle. Like right now, what we've done is pretty much all of our clients, we've taken the foot off the gas for accumulating normal traditional assets. Maybe you're maxing out your 401k. What we're doing right now is we're backing that off to maybe getting the company match. And we're increasing your buys, your DCA of Bitcoin until the next halving. At which point, like we're trying to, right now we're targeting like if you were at a 20% allocation, we're trying to target like a 35 to 40% allocation. And then that paired with what I think Bitcoin will do by the end of 2025, we'll probably be at like a 80 to 90% total allocation in Bitcoin. So yeah, we'll talk through accumulation strategy. How do you buy this thing? Like, where do you buy it? How do you get it? We'll talk through storage. You know, what are these types of wallets? What's multi-sig versus single sig versus a Lightning wallet and all these things. So there's the multiple stages. But yeah, we'll also talk about how do you get exposure. That's pretty base level. And typically they do want exposure directly. I encourage them, like obviously if you're going to own Bitcoin, the purest means of owning Bitcoin is to own Bitcoin and to own it in cold storage. Now I have to explain what is cold storage and what are these wallets and why do you own these things? And that's overcoming fear and FUD itself is these cold storage wallets. Because most people who are exposed to these say, hey, wasn't there a guy in the Netherlands who lost a wallet and now he's going through a landfill? Or isn't there a guy in California who's about to lose $1 zillion because it's encrypted and something? And that's fear people have. So we talk through like, well, what does it mean to be self-custodied and all that? But we'll also, yeah, as far as exposure goes, we'll also talk through like alternative means of getting quasi exposure to Bitcoin and price movement. And then we talk through like, yeah, buying miners. You know, people have heard about GBTC. How do we buy these things? And asset location. That's a really important conversation we have. Like if you're going to own an asset, maybe you want to be, just make it easy math. You want to be 50-50 Bitcoin to traditional assets, and half of your money is in a Roth IRA and half of it is in a traditional IRA. Well, if you're going to own an asset that you think that will go up asymmetrically, it would be nice to own that asset in an account that's growing tax-free. So we'll talk about asset location and probably overbuying inside of the Roth and then hedging that inside of their traditional. And then how much should you own directly? And, you know, so yeah, these are conversations to be had. But yeah, we really heavily push buying Bitcoin directly, self-custodying. How do you do that? Really, really pushing that strong. You know, what is multi-sig? That's really important. I think, you know, I get a lot of flack from Bitcoiners as well. I live in this weird camp of just taking heat from two sides. That's okay. And a lot of the heat is like, Bitcoin is my financial plan. And actually just wrote an article that came out last week and it talks about this. You know, Bitcoin is not a financial plan, but it should be part of it. And I think it was Satoshi in the early day forums actually mentioned, like someone asked about lost coins. And he mentioned that, hey, it's going to be a donation to other Bitcoin holders. And unfortunately, I think there will be a fair amount of Bitcoiners who will die at an earlier age, like than expected, without an estate plan, and they will make donations to other Bitcoiners. Like, you need an estate plan. Owning Bitcoin directly is not an estate plan. You need that. Like, what happens if you own 20 Bitcoin, you kick the bucket today and you have a 5-year-old? Like, what are they supposed to do with that? Or if you understand Bitcoin, your wife doesn't, and you kick the bucket, what's she going to do with it? Or if you want to give it to a charity, what's going to happen with that? That doesn't even get into like the tax planning around Bitcoin and all these other things. So yeah, there's a lot of fun planning to be done in this, even that niche conversation itself.
What might an estate plan look like?
Well, I mean, estate plan can cover a lot of things. That's why I even mentioned that article. Like, Bitcoin will not that will not change the government being able to decide where your kids go if you and your wife get hit by a bus together. Like, Bitcoin doesn't help that. So you better have things in line to tell you, like, hey, I want my kids to go here, rather than the state to decide those things. You know, both of us have young kids, and if my wife and I, Kendra and I, get hit by the bus and die at the same time, who's going to decide what happens to our Bitcoin stack at that point? That's where a trust comes in. A trust is just a means of providing control from the grave. And so you might want to have a trust for your Bitcoin. You might want to just tell someone, hey, here's where the Bitcoin's at. Here's how you access it. There's a lot there. Like, do you have a how do you better trust someone a lot if you're going to have a single sig wallet and there's some sort of directory that says, hey, if I die and you need to control my Bitcoin, here's how you get access to my wallet, here's the private key, all of those things. You better have something in line that makes sure that they're available to get it now or then, but they can't get to it now. That, or that's when you probably want to start introducing a multi-sig setup to help with estate planning. So there's, I mean, just right there, there's a few things that you'll probably want to consider with with this. Families look a lot different than individuals. What happens again, like what happens with your Bitcoin if maybe you're single, or maybe you're married and have kids, but when you die, you want all your Bitcoin to go to a charity. Like, do you want the charity to sell the Bitcoin right away and go and buy puppies or feed puppies with it, or do you want them to hold it for a particular period of time? You better disclose that in your estate plan. Otherwise, it's up to them. So yeah, Bitcoin itself is not a total strategy. It's just it's a means of making your existing strategy better, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Really is. So much work to be done in this space, and that's what's exciting about it. And I know there's a lot of people out there thinking through these topics. I had Peter Dunworth on recently. He's doing a lot of work around that in Australia. And then again, of course, you have, well, what happens in Australia versus America versus England? What are there international solutions to all of this? How is it best to think about it? And then, just as you've got comfortable being self-sovereign, you're setting up a trust, which is inviting a third party in to know a lot of detail. In fact, the detail that you shouldn't be sharing with anybody about how to access your Bitcoin. It's another mental loophole to get comfortable with going through.
Yeah, there's so many things to unravel there. Do you put it in trust? Do you trust a trust with this, or do you keep it more discreet? There's a lot of fun like tax planning to be done as well with Bitcoin. Again, this is what I wrote about last week, just talking through. And the reason I bring this up is a lot of Bitcoin maxes out there talk about how Bitcoin itself is all you need. Well, it's like, well, that's fantastic, but maybe there's a family I work with who own a pretty good amount of Bitcoin that's been bought at all different prices from about $1,000 up to 69,000, and we're looking to move it off of one custodian to another, but like they own a decent amount of Bitcoin at an exchange that you can only sweep off a few grand a week, and if Bitcoin goes up, they literally will never get it all off of that exchange. So how do we make sure they're getting off that exchange, but not sending Uncle Sam more than necessary? So I had this client send me all of their Bitcoin purchases they've ever made at all of their exchanges. And Jack, my assistant, he and I just spent a few days living in spreadsheets, looking at, okay, here's all of their transaction history. Here's how much they bought. Here's the price they bought it at. Here's where it's at right now. And we just look like, all right, what's his average cost basis? What can we sell right now for a capital loss? What's in the money, at the money, or out the money? We went through all that. We found, okay, all this Bitcoin that's sitting in this exchange that we want to get off of here, we can, instead of trying to just move it off, we can actually sell this amount, and we're going to identify these lots. That way we're looking at a capital loss. We can offset those losses with these capital gains on this. And now, fortunately, we're able to sweep all the Bitcoin off of that exchange through selling it and just be done with that exchange. And now we're buying our Bitcoin at another exchange that we can just sweep it off to cold storage immediately. Like, an easier solution would have been, hey, let's just sell everything. We'll start fresh elsewhere. Because, if you really value self-sovereignty and not having Bitcoin on a third party, then you would probably want to do that. But again, had he just sold everything on that one exchange just to have that sovereignty, he would have been looking at a massive tax mess. Instead of just doing a little bit of work. I mean, spreadsheets are terrible. I hate that stuff. But it saved him a whole bunch of money tax-wise. Just saying, look, we just took note. Here's the lots we're selling. Here's the lots that we're going to keep. And we're just identifying that. Save some money that you're not sending Uncle Sam. That would be wasted anyways. So there's that. I mean, capital gain harvesting, tax loss harvesting, gifting. there's a lot of fun things you want to consider. Leaving Bitcoin and stuff to an estate if you're going to gift it. Yeah, I'm excited to see companies as they pop up as far as like transacting in Bitcoin, like business to business, keeping track of cost basis for these things a lot more intuitive way. One of my companies, I tried to have it as like Bitcoin itself as the payment rails. It was a really bad experience, but I know some people who are working on this, like business payment systems. And yeah, I think that'll be a great way to orange pill. Right now in our town, I've noticed that lately a lot of restaurants and stuff in town are charging the extra 4% fee if you pay with a credit card to incentivize people. Like, look, this is expensive for us, and give us something else. So I think what I'm going to start doing whenever, maybe in the new year when I have a little bit more time, start going out and trying to orange pill small businesses, primarily restaurants who are high in transaction fees, and introducing them to the Lightning Network and showing them, look, you don't have to charge your visitors 4% more if you just use this other payment rails. So I think these ways are going to be huge in orange pilling the masses. And again, fortunately there's other people who are way smarter than I am who are actually building these products and the payment rails out there. I'm excited for these things to roll out. But I mean, these are the conversations that are impactful to people out there. Is the individual, what is this? And then companies, how do we solve this issue of you're already being squeezed, your margins are tight, and suddenly like, Visa's eking out of you another 4%. What can we do besides collecting cash? That's expensive as well. Now you're paying some 17-year-old kid to sit there and count your cash all evening. You got to pick your poison when you could just have Bitcoin as final payment system that is outrageously inexpensive. So there's needs out there. We just have to address it in the same way.
Yeah, man, there certainly is. We need more people. We need more people, and that's why I like the fact that everybody that's coming through your doors is getting orange pilled, and slowly but surely, and in the right manner as well, because they're going to see the difference it makes to their lives right in front of their eyes. And that's going to release the next wave of Bitcoiners. And if you've got a bunch of professional, highly skilled people coming through, just imagine in 5 years' time, when they're released from that fiat hell, they want to be done with work by the age of 45, 55, and they realize, I'm 37 and Bitcoin's at $1 million. So I'm done. But what do I do now? How do I give back? What do I build in the Bitcoin space? And that's where we see that next wave of innovation and the entrepreneurs coming into the space or being rekindled and going back to our natural state of entrepreneurship and being able to utilize our greatest tool, which is our time, to put our minds into something of greater value and than just doing the day-to-day drudgery of that career that we painted ourselves into a corner of. So yeah, bullish, very bullish on the next couple of years and the next wave of Bitcoiners coming through. Mate, where can people find you if they want to carry on this conversation? Pick your brains. It sounds like it's very kind of US centric what you do, but there's a lot of international knowledge to be gleaned from this as well. So do you take clients remotely, or is it just in-house? What can you say to folks that might be interested in getting in touch?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. It's Jim Kreider TX, as in Texas. So Jim Kreider TX. Our website is Intentional Living FP, as in financialplanning.com. On there, there's a homepage. There's my calendar. You want to throw 15 minutes on there? Happy to talk. If you just have a one-off question, yeah, let's talk. I'm happy to answer that with you. As far as clients, no, I've about 70 clients, and I've met a handful of them in person. So I have clients in about 20 states, pretty much all remote, which is nice. Again, like my average client is me. And my wife and I certainly don't want to take time off of work or out of our busy day and go hire a babysitter so I can go talk to a financial planner. That's a terrible use of a babysitter. If I'm getting a babysitter, we're going on a date. So yeah, we meet with our clients pretty much all remotely on Zoom. So yeah, if you have any questions, would love to chat with you. And I have a handful of clients who are handful of clients who are also internationally based. So yeah, we'd love to talk, even if it's not about financial planning, if it's, I don't know, marriage based or whatever. I've had a lot of conversations and would love to just be listening ear.
All right, excellent. Well, the final question, as always, if you had one last orange pill left to give to somebody, who would you give that to and why?
Man, I've been thinking about this one, trying to come up with a good answer. I would love to be able to orange pill a guy named Michael Kitces. He is the godfather of financial planning, outrageously smart. He's the most influential person in the traditional financial planning space. And yeah, I think he's one of those guys who's just a little bit too smart for Bitcoin right now. But man, if once he gets it, that will change the financial planning space. I would love to see that. So yeah, Michael Kitces. Yeah, he runs a blog called The Nerd's Eye View. Outrageously smart, amazing financial planner. So his time will come, hopefully sooner than later.
All right. Well, you know what to do, plebs. Get following him on Twitter. Keep putting the Bitcoin hashtag underneath there and sending across all the resources and stuff. We'll get them. We'll get them all in the end, Jim.
There we go.
All right, man. Thanks for coming on. Loved the conversation.
Thanks, Daniel. I appreciate you having me.
See ya.